Sure.
Sending the email out. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Substack Live here at Go Long. Tyler Dunn here with Jay Skurski of the Buffalo News. A pleasure, as always, to welcome those who are hanging out with us inside of the Substack app. I greatly appreciate you all. Okay, enough small talk, Jay Skurski. The Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills are facing off, and it may be the game of the year. It really could be when you've got MVP candidates. You've got Derrick Henry, 6'3", 245, 1% body fat. I don't think it's 1%, but pretty close. First thoughts on a matchup, let's face it, everybody wanted. If you're an objective football consumer, you want Josh Allen, you want Lamar Jackson, you want these two teams playing at Highmark Stadium, which is going to be about, 3 degrees on Sunday? It's going to be cold.
So first thoughts are this is probably not objectively what the Bills fans wanted, right? Because this is a tough opponent. I mean, and we saw it in week 4. We've seen it really throughout the season. Every time I watch the Ravens, I come away thinking, how did they lose 5 games, right? Because that is such a hard tandem to stop with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And so I think the first thought is this was not the draw that the Bills wanted. But that's what happens when you end up as the 2 seed. So a couple different things. Number one, it shows the value of the 1 seed, right? You look at Kansas City; they've got the bye, they've got the Texans at home. I mean, come on, right? In the divisional round, that should be a trip to the AFC Championship. So the 1 seed is valuable. Anybody that says that it isn't, I disagree with that.
Now you sound like Rex Ryan, though. You're calling it a bye week.
It's not a bye week.
D'Amico Ryans, he's going to play this now. He's going to use it as bulletin board material.
I know he's watching, but I know it's not a bye week, but that's the more favorable of the draw, right? And then the second thing is what you just mentioned there, the weather. I think I read yesterday that Lamar Jackson has not played, and obviously Baltimore, right? It's not Miami. They've played cold weather games. I don't know that they've ever played a game this cold. And what's the impact there? And that goes for Derrick Henry too. Been in the league a long time, both of those guys. They have not played in a game that has been this cold or is forecast to be this cold. The Bills have. You look back to that Patriots game a few years ago, the perfect game, right? And they showed that they can play in those types of conditions. If you're looking for any small advantage, I think that the Bills being more accustomed to, because let's face it, 25 degrees is different than 3 degrees.
Huge difference.
It's a difference.
Right. If you're not from here, you might think, oh, cold is cold. No. That is a major difference.
Yeah. And this is coming from a couple of bearded guys wearing beanies indoors, right? So, exactly. But no, I mean, listen, those are just a couple of the initial thoughts, before we get to X's and O's and all of that stuff. But those 2 things stand out to me, and especially, being Jackson going into an atmosphere that he has not been in, at least in terms of the cold, and then we know how hostile this environment is going to be with the fans. It's going to be a challenge for them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who this would favor. I probably would think it's the people who live here. It's, if you have to deal with this shit every day, the cold, the bitter cold. Yeah. And I guess my brain goes back to Wisconsin because those 5 years, that's a different level of cold. Yeah. You're talking negatives forever. But still, it probably favors you if you're living in this. But also, if you're Terrell Bernard, we just talked to him, some of these players on the Buffalo defense, I cannot think tackling Derrick Henry is a fun experience if it's this cold.
No,
it's never a fun experience in general.
Not 75 either, but
when he is rolling downhill.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it does favor Baltimore with the way they play.
I get it, right, in terms of Baltimore's run game and why you think it may favor them. But here's the thing. I think the Bills are built differently this year. They can run the ball effectively. They can run the ball when they want to, and they can run the ball when they need to. That's a really nice recipe. Can they run it as well as Baltimore? Let's find out, right? I can't say for sure that they can, but I also can't. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, there's no chance that the Bills can have success on the ground. They've shown in just this past week against Denver that James Cook is a damn good player, and Ray Davis, if he gets back into the lineup, is a good player. Ty Johnson, who I know you were talking to today in the locker room, is an awesome player. Every time the guy touches the ball, something good seems to happen for this team. So
immediately, when he first was in the offense in the middle of last season, he touches the ball, something good happens.
Right. Yeah. It seems to be that way. Now the question is, can the Bills stop the run? Same, the Ravens have to answer that question too, though.
I'm sure you guys will be getting into it all week at the Buffalo News. Again, if you want to get right for this matchup, subscribe to the Buffalo News. You guys have just a cavalry of reporters here every day. And of course, go along if you want some long form when it comes to this matchup. We're both covering it. I imagine that you guys are going to be looking at the X's and O's of this all because I don't know if you're Bobby Babbage, if you're Sean McDermott, and I think you got into this Monday. Like there was probably no time between Denver game ends, getting ready for Baltimore. Yeah. I mean, he kind of like peeked over toward his office in that press conference Sunday night and said, "Yeah, I should probably get over there." When you're preparing to face Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, do you? No, they've kind of gone with a lot of Taron Johnson, right?
Yeah.
Or they've kind of played all year.
Yeah.
Do you want to replace him with a linebacker?
No. That's I don't think you change who you are. You've gotten to this point. They are a nickel defense. That's their base defense. Taron Johnson is an every down football player for this team. Matt Milano is darn close to that. He's sort of working his way back in. Terrell Bernard is an every down player. I'd be surprised if they changed who they were entirely because I think Jackson is good enough that if you do take Taron Johnson off the field and you're putting a linebacker on there, why wouldn't you go after that linebacker in coverage, right?
Yeah.
It's the chess match. So I don't believe. And one thing that has stood out to me last week, and today is the first day that we've been in here this week at practice, but the approach from the Bills last week was business as usual. We are not treating this game any differently, meaning the playoffs where it's one and done against the Broncos. And I think they would be wise to continue with that. It was successful last week. I don't think they should change it this week. I think they need to play. Let's not forget, Bernard, Milano, and Taron Johnson all missed that game in week 4. Yeah. Now, is that going to swing the tide entirely in favor of the Bills and they win that game? Probably not, right? But I think it certainly makes it a more competitive football game. And one thing that this team has done really well all year, individually, team-wise, is they have thrived on being overlooked, right? The best thing that happened to Josh Allen before the season was being voted the most overrated player in the league. The next best thing was when he didn't make the first team All-Pro because he thrives on that kind of thing. This defense knows what's being said about him. They knew it ahead of the Denver game. Can't stop third down. Can't defend the run. Well, guess what? They did both of those things really well against the Broncos. Now, this is another challenge, a greater challenge. But in terms of having that motivation, that the old nobody believed in us is like probably the most overused old motivational ploy in sports. But for the Bills, home underdogs where they haven't lost all season, like they don't have to look far for motivation for this game.
You just took the words out of my mouth. Exactly, because there's party that thinks, oh, that's contrived. I mean, you're the Buffalo Bills. People are being celebrated locally, nationally, but they are an underdog in their own building where they just been undefeated for the first time since 1990.
Right.
That's kind of nuts. I mean, they've only gotten better. They've only been peaking for the most part. And I mean, I want to get your sense on this too, because I mean, you're here every day and you have been for a long time. What year did you start covering the team?
Jeez, I mean, I've been in here in some form or fashion going back to covering Mike Mularkey and Dick Duran and Chan Gailey. And so,
we were
I've been around
on the Rex Ryan.
Exactly.
Which was wild. I really do hope Rex gets that Jets job because I really want to do a story looking back at that time.
How fun would that be?
Why did we not take more meticulous notes on those years? Because you didn't know what the hell was going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, but it does seem like a looser head coach, a looser team. Like, you don't want to just treat it like it's a pickup football game, obviously. But maybe in the past, not maybe, this is coming from coaches and players who have been here. Things were a little tight, were a little tense into some of these titanic matchups.
Yeah.
And defensively, the numbers bear that out. They've struggled in these elimination games. So this is a huge moment for the defense, for the head coach. And it does seem like we're just talking to some of these players. I mean, we're getting them in, a very small window in the course of the day, in the course of the week. They seem pretty loose. They seem pretty relaxed.
Yeah.
You kind of have to have that business as usual approach. Does it seem different to you than past years, maybe at this point of the year?
A little bit, yeah, it does. And I think, talking to some of the leaders on this team, I think back to a conversation I had last week with Matt Collins, who has emerged as, I think, a fan favorite and a guy that a lot of people in this locker room are following. And, you would not have known that he was preparing for a playoff game. He just, his tone, his demeanor, the words that he used all made it sound like, let's just keep doing what we did to get us to this point. And I think so. I don't think you can really, his presence, I think, has meant a lot. But it goes beyond just him. They've got a good group of leaders. They turned this team over to Josh Allen, right? We knew that,
which is huge.
And he is a guy that you know how you've been around him. You spent a lot of time around him. He is not one to succumb to any type of pressure. That just doesn't seem. He's nervous before the game, certainly. He's talked about that, but he plays pretty cool and collected.
It's a real thing. When you watch Vikings-Rams, you could see early in that game with Sam Darnold that he was nervous.
100%.
Even the completion to Justin Jefferson, it was like he's patting the ball.
You can see it in his face.
Visibly shaken.
Yeah.
And you could see it in his face. Like these games, these quarterbacks, they know this is where legacies are defined. In this case, this is where tens of millions of dollars are going to go one direction or the other.
Yeah.
And Josh has been the same quarterback.
Yeah.
In all of these moments. His numbers are insane in these playoff games.
Yeah, or if not better, right, than the regular season. He is, with the possible exception of the loss to Cincinnati when the entire team did not play well in the divisional round a few years ago. That, and again, you wonder if they just hit an emotional wall given what had happened to Hamlin, where, you and I were at that game. So I do think, though, that this is a team that knows, as you said, legacies are defined, right? And they know that this game today, on Sunday, is going to define in a lot of ways their season, right or wrong, good or bad. I like the approach. I like what I've seen. I think the head coach has relaxed. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. He's settled into his role in his 8th season here. He's had an enormous amount of success in the regular season. They've had playoff success 5 years in a row. To reach the divisional round is an accomplishment. I know it's not the ultimate goal, certainly, but you keep taking cracks at it, and we'll see what that looks like on Sunday. One thing that we should point out from the Denver game, that could have gotten away from them. That could have gone bad. I mean, they're down 7-0, 2 minutes into the game, and maybe in years past things get a little tense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't seem like there was any of that, though, at all. And even at halftime, it's 10-7. Denver's a missed field goal away from 10-10, and I think, probably speaking for Bills fans, knowing who I'm communicating with via text and buddies and things like that, they're a little bit nervous at that time. If the team was feeling that, though, they didn't show it.
Rasul Douglas had a great line inside the locker room after the game. He's like, it's got 58 more minutes. Like, if you start the day and something bad happens for a few seconds, it's not like the whole day is ruined. I think they've got a good mix of veterans who have been there, who are calloused. You need some of that. But also, like Brandon Beane said way back in the spring, there's a value to having players who just don't have those scars. That weren't here for 13 seconds in that Cincinnati game.
Matt Collins doesn't have them, right?
Exactly.
Khalil Shakir's got them a little bit, but not to the extent of, maybe the 13
so
seconds.
So that here we go again isn't going to kick in, on a play like that.
Douglas is a great example because, and let's start there with Douglas. They're healthy. They weren't healthy last year. They weren't healthy at all.
He had a torn MCL. He played all 50 snaps on a torn MCL, and he's on the field. Think of who wasn't on the field.
Right, and so you're losing Terrell Bernard, and you have AJ Klein out there. I mean, that's a big difference, right? And you lose a game by 3 points. Talking to some of those guys, Douglas especially has pointed out, it's usually the team right now at this point in the stage, at this stage of the season, everyone's good. It's who's the healthiest, and the Bills are the healthiest team in the playoffs.
You got to give a lot of credit to the Buffalo Bills, training staff. Really, look around the league at some of these teams. I mean, that have had 8, 9, 10 different line combinations. I mean, Spencer Brown's talking. He's the only one who really missed a game.
Missed one game.
The Kansas City game.
In the last 2 years, they've missed one start on the offensive line. But you look at winning the division December 1st allowed them Taylor Rapp, Damar Hamlin, Rasul Douglas, Curtis Samuel. All of these guys sat out weeks where they were questionable on the injury report. If those were playoff games, could they have been in there? I bet they could have. And they gave them the time to sort of get back and get right, get healthy. And I think it's, now is when you hope that pays off.
Yeah, last year was just this all-out, balls to the wall, sprint
they had
to the finish line.
Needed 6 in a row, right?
You needed every one of those.
Yep.
And so you're losing bodies. You're not able to rest. And it took a toll. To the point where you get to that Kansas City game. Just to keep it interactive here, we did have a couple questions in the back of my mind. I think it was Bill Tuller. He asked about Lamar Jackson defending Baltimore's. He's going to win MVP, judging by the All-Pro vote, in all likelihood. And I can remember his first MVP season covering that game for Bleacher Report against Tennessee in the divisional round. And the numbers are really misleading. The Titans did a hell of a job on him. And he didn't look like he did all season long. And Logan Ryan, who's now in the media, I believe he's joined the dark side. I was talking to him after that game, and he said, well, the old engage 8 on Madden, that's basically what we did.
Yeah.
Like this one thing you do against your 8-year-old brother that would work on N64, that's what they did to Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
And it worked because he couldn't throw, the nerves kicked in, whatever. It's not going to work this time around when you're replacing Greg Roman with Todd Monken. Lamar Jackson has evolved as a passer. You throw Derrick Henry in there. Like you say, the Bills should stick to being who they are defensively. How do you stop Lamar Jackson from what you've seen? I'm not really sure because the Henry factor changes. You've got 2 unicorns at the mesh point. Somebody's going to keep the ball, and he might throw it. Good luck.
Well, so, I mean, what did we see Pittsburgh do last week? They seemed to sort of key on Henry, right? They crashed down. You saw often when it was those RPO-style plays and at the mesh point, they went after Henry. Maybe the Bills looked at that and say, all right, well, that didn't work. We got to go after Lamar. And, the interesting thing, and you just pointed it out there, was that individually, the Bills have had success against Lamar. They've had success against Derrick Henry at times. Now, both of those guys, especially in Henry's case, have really hurt the Bills individually in certain games. But the challenge is when you combine them, right? And Sean McDermott said on Monday that he's not seen a combination like this before in the league. This is a guy that's been 20 plus years in the NFL. So it's a supreme challenge. That being said, I do feel like a little bit here in Buffalo, and I think a lot of this has to do with Week 4, right, and the result of that game. But we are sitting here talking about this Ravens team like they've never lost a game. They lost 5 games. Like they are beatable, right? Let's not pretend like it's impossible, and then let's also think that they're having the same conversation in Baltimore about how do you stop Josh Allen, right? And so maybe it's a game where you need Allen to be Superman. Maybe it's a game where the team that has the ball last wins. If I knew the answer to how to stop Lamar Jackson, I'd probably be, over there in one of those offices making a lot more money than I'm making. So I don't really know, but I would just say going back to the point you asked about originally, do they change, do they go to, 3 linebackers? I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I'm not a believer in changing who you are. I think you have to play your game. And I think if you fundamentally change your defense in a way that we have never seen Sean McDermott change his defense, that to me says we're scared. We're looking for answers. We don't know what to do. Believe in your guys. Come up with the best game plan possible, and then just try to execute it.
I mean, Balin Spector is not going to be. I mean, with all due respect to Balin Spector, he's not starting the entire game.
You've got Bernard and you've got Milano. Those are
and Taron Johnson.
Those are. I mean, if you go on the short list of important defensive players for the Bills, those are 3 of the top 5 easily, right? I mean, you're probably putting Benford and Rousseau in there as your top 5 in some order, but maybe Milano drops out of that just because of the injuries recently. But Bernard and Taron Johnson are absolutely critical to what they do.
You're right, and it probably is a matter of just, and then this is kind of fits into the philosophy of what Sean wants to do. No big plays. Like they're probably going to be content with the 11-yard runs, maybe a 14-yard, pass in the flat to one of these tight ends. They'll just rally to the ball, make them go 12, 13 plays, because then 1 sack, 1 penalty can nuke your drive.
And can they get the ball out? Can they force a fumble? Can they create a turnover? They've lived and died on the turnovers all year. I thought going into last week against Denver that there's some risk in that, right? Because they're not always sustainable. You can't predict them. I thought they needed to do a better job on 3rd down. They certainly did that against Denver. Talked to Greg Rousseau after the game. He said, 3rd down starts on 1st down. We have to be successful on 1st down to get those into advantageous 3rd down situations. So that's the challenge: is can you have enough success on the early downs to make it hard on the Baltimore's offense, because they're going to convert 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3 and 3rd and 4 probably all day long with that run pass option.
I think that both defenses are night and day a hell of a lot better than what they were, back in Week 4. And so it might seem simplistic, but it's going to come down to the Herculean plays. Yeah. It's the 4th and 1, Josh Allen extending it for 7 plays, finding Ty Johnson in the back of the end zone. I know, I don't know if you heard Sean's presser after the game. You could tell not that thrilled with
that being the 4th. It's a broken play.
It's a broken. Right. He's absolutely right, because he's like, how many yards we need? I think it's Sal Mariano asked the question. 1 yard. How long was it? 25, 20. But you almost kind of have to embrace the extreme of Josh Allen's game, because I feel like both defenses are going to be so much better. It's the playoffs. Nothing's going to come easy. Can Josh Allen bust loose and have a few of those plays, those moments? Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry,
can they contain those enough
stuff that kind of transcends the X's and O's, right?
Yeah, listen, none of this is any secret, right? We love to overcomplicate things when it comes to football, but
Jimmys and Joes.
It's the Jimmys and Joes. Win the turnover battle, be better on third down, convert in the red zone. Those are three very simplistic keys, but I think they're going to be huge. The red zone against Denver wasn't good early, right? I think 1 out of 3 on their first 3 attempts. That isn't going to be good enough against Baltimore. When you get down there, it's got to be touchdowns. Do those things, and I think that the Bills should like their chances in this game. I'm not predicting that they're going to win by any stretch, but if they do those things, win the turnover battle, convert in the red zone, do a reasonable to good job on third down, I think they would, they'd have a chance in this one.
Real quick, because this was another question that popped up earlier. Ed Oliver, which Ed Oliver shows up.
If you're looking for guys that that have quite frankly not in postseason losses of the past, Oliver and Daquan Jones, it starts there. That's not me saying it. That's Sean McDermott.
Right.
Listen to him after every single game, win or lose. The first thing he goes to is pretty much the line of scrimmage. Did they win it? Did they win it up front, offensive line versus their D-line? Did the Bills' defensive line control the game against the opposing offensive line? This is what they're paying out Oliver for. He's got to be great in this game.
Totally agree. Can't be soccer goalie on the penalty kick guessing in the run game.
No.
It's got to be sound when you're playing the Ravens.
Yeah, listen, we know who Ed Oliver is. He's not the biggest defensive tackle in the league or anything even close to it. He's more of a penetrating guy, but when he played 80% of the snaps last week against Denver. He is almost an every down player for this defense. That's a huge number that is rarely attained for a defensive lineman in Sean McDermott's scheme. That tells me a lot that they, could tell you a couple different things. Number one, maybe they don't love what they've got behind him, but number two, they trust him, and they, he's their guy. He's going to be out there a lot, and if that's the case, he's got to be impactful, whether that's in the run, in the run defense, early downs, and then when he does get an opportunity to rush, he's got to win.
Awesome stuff. Jay Skurski, the Buffalo News, Tyler Dunn here at Go Along. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us here on Substack Live, and obviously we're going to repost it at the site. Everywhere you listen to the podcast, be sure to read all of Jay's coverage. Anything you got coming cooking that people should read?
Yeah, I would love it. In Friday's edition of the Buffalo News, I'm doing a story on Desiree Festa is her name, and she is the Bills sports psychologist. Ooh. And it is a very I sat down with her on Thursday for almost a half an hour, and I talked to a couple of the guys in the locker room today about working with her and the mental health aspect that goes into being in the NFL, dealing with the pressure that comes with these types of playoff games.
Exactly.
It's a story that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. I figured now is a really good time for it. And one small part of the story is a little bit of a teaser. There are only 6 teams in the league that have a dedicated full-time sports psychologist on staff, which I found to be really interesting. And I think it does show the way that the Bills and Sean McDermott prioritize that in the building. And so her impact on the team, again, this is not an X's and O's story, but I think when you talk about playoff pressure, it's the timing of it is pretty good. So that's a fascinating one. I hope people enjoy reading it as much as I've enjoyed kind of getting to know a little bit about what her process is and what she means to the team. So
that's going to be fascinating. I cannot wait to read that. And this is a perfect time for it.
Yeah.
I feel like we're always talking about the psychology of the Bills in a moment like this.
Right.
And it maybe not being so great in the past. It seems great to us right now. So make sure you read this story.
Yeah. Sean McDermott on Monday was asked about what the difference, why have they not been able to get over the hump in the playoffs, right? They've had this success I mentioned earlier, 5 trips to the divisional round in a row, but only once have they gone beyond that and have fallen short, several times. And his answer was, it starts with a mindset. And so it's not anything physical. It's not X's and O's. That's not what he believes has held this team back. Well, that's what Desiree Festa is here for, is to help this team with their mindset collectively. That's players, that's coaching staff, that's front office. And so, just examining that a little bit more and, what it could mean in a game like this.
Love it. Cannot wait to read it. Oh, we had one last question sneak in. I'll just hit on this quick. Do you think the Ravens kicker, Justin Tucker, will be ready for this game from Nicholas? You mentioned those 5 losses. I believe They lost those 5 games by a total of 22 points.
Yeah.
And he missed 22 points worth of kicks.
Just crazy.
So he has kind of steadied since then.
Yeah.
I would think. But who knows? I think what the Bills probably should do is what Kelsey and Mahomes did in the AFC Championship game last year, right? You kind of, wherever he's warming up, just start setting up and throwing the ball around. Like, who could be those players for the Bills just going to screw around with the kicker?
Yeah, man, who's got the personality?
If Isaiah McKenzie was still on the team, that'd be perfect.
One guy that would. I would have to think about this a little bit more, but I would imagine Benford would not care at all about getting into a kicker's face, and like he would probably have nothing, and he would just do it with like a stone cold demeanor too. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's a good question.
Alec Anderson, I think that'd be a good intimidation factor.
I was thinking more defensively. Alec Anderson he would volunteer
just
to
have
go
him
out
like
there and do
strut
it.
around, right? Like Mike Tyson walking out to DMX before a fight. Just kind of have him circle.
I'm going with Benford and Anderson. Okay. 2 good answers.
I mean, that's all. I hope if the Bills are watching, listening to this podcast, I think they just found the secret to success. There's the key right there. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll catch you next time.